Welcome back to the Dark Reading News Desk here at RSA 2023. Terry Sweeney here with Dark Reading, and joining me now is Delilah Schwartz, security strategist with Cybersixgill. Delilah, thanks for coming by the news desk.
Thanks for having me.
Cybersixgill recently released a report on the state of the cybercrime underground. Tell us a bit about the report and some of the key findings.
Right, so every year we tend to look annually at the total collection of our data. We collect about 10 million items per day, and over a year it's really interesting to look at the trends and the evolutions that have gone on, what cybercriminals are leaning towards, what they're talking about. And some of the main findings have been really interesting, tend to follow similar trends that we've witnessed over previous years. That's the continued rise of initial access broker markets, ransomware as a service is still very popular, and now over the recent months we've seen a lot of conversation about AI, generative AI. Cybercriminals are really embracing this new tool as a force multiplier for cybercrime. All of this together have really indicated a lowering of the barriers of entry, allowing lower skilled, less technical cybercriminals to sort of break their way into the cybercrime industry.
Everybody's getting on the automation bandwagon, apparently.
Yes, well, it's time that the cyber defenders do as well.
Any surprises among the data or key findings?
Well, I think part of the research involved sort of validating our assessment that the barriers to entry were lowering. If that was the case, we would expect to see a diversification in the number of actors that were handling these ransomware attacks, and also an escalation in the total number of ransomware attacks. What we actually did see was that there seemed to be a consolidation, but that didn't take into account the ransomware affiliates and the ransomware as a service model, which is growing to be much like an everyday business, with an executive branch that handles the ransomware and the employee of the month and an affiliate model and an HR department. And so they're leasing out their ransomware and their infrastructure, which sort of makes it seem as if these ransomware groups are all behind the attacks, but it's actually just the ransomware variant that's been scaled to allow for distribution by a myriad of various threat actor networks and affiliate networks.
Well, closer to home, how can cyber threat intel and attack surface management provide CISOs and other security professionals with the peace of mind without getting in the way of the business doing what the business does?
Yeah, I think that's a big challenge for CISOs, is the two sort of conflicting goals. One is obviously, as a cybersecurity professional, maintaining cyber hygiene and protecting the organization from attack. And on the other end, as an executive, is to facilitate those business goals and help drive business expansion. And that's quite hard as the attack surface expands and we're migrating to the cloud and digitizing, embracing remote work, bringing on more platforms, etc. The attack surface expands, and CISOs are already struggling with a sheer number of assets they have to protect. Some of them they're not even aware of. We've got shadow IT and assets that they're not even sure that they even exist or connected to the organizational network. So ASM with EASM, the external discovery of external assets, allows you to really be sure that you've wrapped your arms around the entire perimeter, that you're aware of the scope of your attack surface and of your organizational environment they're trying to protect. And that, along with CTI, allows you to really monitor all those organizational assets in real time, continuously across the deep, dark and clear web, so you can identify those points of exposure and then move to prioritize the threats that actually pose the greatest risk to your organization, allowing you to scale your assets, add more to your attack surface while knowing that you're able to really focus on the threats that matter to your business.
We were talking just a few minutes ago about AI and generative AI.
Yeah.
AI and automation are almost being used interchangeably in the marketing realm, which isn't a perfect fit, but close enough, right? Talk a little bit about how AI and automation, and I think generative AI is probably where we're headed with this, but how do they lower the barriers to entry for cyber criminals?
So as part of the research for my report, I spent a lot of time with ChatGPT. We became quite close friends, spent a lot of time prompting, redirecting, and ultimately had ChatGPT write me an info stealer malware with a little caveat at the bottom that it's for educational purposes only. But I also did a lot of research through our portal on the underground. And pretty much as soon as ChatGPT was released, cybercriminals were actively discussing how to abuse it, in those words, for their own malicious purposes. So some threat actors have used it to create malware, like I did, and others have also used it to create dark web marketplaces with a full cryptocurrency payment system. They're all speaking about the different ways to evade the protective mechanisms that OpenAI has enforced to try to avoid these kind of circumstances. But frankly, it's already being used for spear phishing, which is, the curated, specific, personalized emails that, is hard for a cyber criminal, especially one that doesn't speak English natively, to really hone in and successfully deceive someone to click on that link and to compromise their computer. There are many different ways that cybercriminals are and will be using generative AI. As part of my report, I wrote quite a comprehensive table about the full ransomware attack chain, especially the pre-ransomware activities, and how ChatGPT and similar systems of generative AI can help to fast-track, automate, and just accelerate that entire process. So it allows cybercriminals that, again, don't necessarily have the time or the expertise to be doing these things to really be able to scale their operations, and with these tools just launch and spread these whole different types of attacks.
Sure.
And I think we haven't even begun to scratch the surface of what the threats really are.
Well, like other generative AI users, it sounds like the cyber criminals are doing the same thing, feeding the model, improving the model, teaching it, working with its biases.
Refining it,
Yeah,
that's right,
absolutely.
fine-tuning the prompts a little bit. I think the key is a lot of cybersecurity professionals are poo-pooing the threat of AI because they're saying, oh, it's not going to replace humans. AI is not going to launch an attack end-to-end. It's almost like a 3D printer. It's not going to print for you a gun whole out because we've got protective mechanisms to prevent that and protect against it. But it'll print the cartridge, it'll print the trigger, it'll print the entire gun barrel, and if you know how to put it together, you can have a gun that's usable to shoot someone on the street. It's the same for cyber attacks. It will help you to sort of fine-tune and create all the different components of an attack. You still need a cybercriminal to prompt it in the right way and to ask it to do the right thing, but with the right expertise, and even the smallest amount of expertise, you can be able to put together a whole attack chain.
From a defensive and protection perspective, there's this idea, I'm hearing a lot more at RSA this year, that AI will fight AI to keep us safe from the bad folks using generative AI.
I'm very happy that the cyber defensive community has finally woken up to that, because at Cybersixgill, that was our idea at inception. Since our company began in 2014, we were founded upon this idea of automation, harnessing automation to really be able to properly defend against cyber attacks. Our collection mechanisms are fully automated, our ASM and alerting is fully automated, making sure that the correlation between threats and organizational assets and extraction of entities, all of that is fully automated. So I think it's really time for everybody to wake up and recognize that in order to meet the pace of cybercrime and to sort of avoid that incessant game of cyber whack-a-mole where you're just hitting the threats as they surface, you need to actually be proactive. You need to preempt the attacks before they happen, and that requires some degree of cyber maturity, and that definitely requires automation.
Well, so it's a matter of not if you'll deploy automation, but when will you do it?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
The pressure's on as ChatGPT dominates the headlines.
Absolutely, and some people are worried about it. They don't want to leave their defense up to a machine, and they want to intervene, make sure they're deploying the right defenses. But if we're embracing self-driving cars as a human community, I think it's time that we also try to start embracing automation to automate the various parts of the defensive chain, from detection to response. It's really critical that we begin to do that.
Shifting gears slightly, how does a lack of visibility into the deep web or the dark web put an organization at risk?
Well, I think there's the old adage that you can't defend against what you don't know. And you've got to have eyes where your adversaries are actually planning, talking, and conducting their activities. The same way in national defense, where you've got to have the intelligence arm that's got its eyes and ears on to hear what the adversary's capabilities are, what they want to do, when they're going to do it, how they're going to do it. In the world of cybercrime, in the cybersphere, behind enemy lines is the deep and dark web. That's where cybercriminals plan, discuss, share tactics, tools and techniques, transact their materials, etc. If you're not there, if you're not in there hearing what they want to do, what vulnerabilities are they talking about, what are the latest tools they're discussing, what are the attack vectors that are most popular at the moment, what are the threat actors we really need to be keeping our eyes on, what are the industries that are most at risk. If we don't have that information, you're constantly going to be reactive. You have no idea what the risk's going to be because you're not hearing exactly before it happens. You need to have that first indication of risk rather than simply responding all the time to an attack as it happens. Again, it's that idea of being behind the ball, being behind the pace, rather than reacting, being proactive, preempt.
Delilah, real briefly, what advice would you have for customers who are looking for ways to ensure that they're focusing on the most appropriate risks?
I think it comes to cutting through the noise, threat intelligence. There's a lot of threat intelligence data out there. And frankly, organizations shouldn't care about the threats targeting everyone else. They should care about what's targeting their business. That's where ASM and CTI come together really nicely because ASM almost provides like a filter for your organizational environment, to really focus on your context, your business, your assets, your needs, your environment, to really make sure that you can cut through all of the redundancy, all of the irrelevant alerts, to really be able to focus on the risks that matter most to your business, so you can prioritize your resources, your efforts, your people, your money, where those threats are actually coming from, on the greatest risks that are targeting your organization. That comes to prioritization, that comes on having the internal context on your organization, and also the external context from the threat landscape, and especially from the deep and dark web.
Well, thanks for sharing the findings from the cyber underground. Really appreciate you joining us on the news desk today.
Thanks for having me.
We've been talking with Delilah Schwartz of Cybersixgill. This has been Terry Sweeney for Dark Reading. Thanks for joining us for this segment. We'll see you next time.